So basically it is such a complex way to represent a particular wave. Now even within this, we are talking about photons of energy. What is the meaning of photons of energy? That this electromagnetic wave is not a continuous transmission of energy. It goes in packets. So these packets are called as photons. They behave like a particle, and that is the particle nature of light. Correct? So there were so many controversies which were going on about the nature of wave, which could be what is light, what light means, and what is the type of that energy. It has a lot of theories. There was a Newton's corpuscle theory, in which he said that light is nothing but particles, small particles, and they start getting radiated from a source of light, and when they reach our eyes, they create a sensation of light. And then he gave a suggestion, and then he gave a further description that why do we see different colors? Because the size of the corpuscles, right, they define different colors, and that is how we are able to see different colors of light. But then there were so many other properties of light which were discovered, such as interference of light, diffraction of light, which clearly showed that light is not particle. Particle means if you take rice particles, small rice, small granules, and if you throw them, they will behave in a particular way. They will keep bouncing. If there is an obstacle, they will strike, right? So he tried to even explain that they are so small particles that they will penetrate inside a particle, and therefore refraction takes place. And he said that certain particles cannot penetrate and they reflect, and that is why reflection takes place. But so many other theories of lights were there, such as total internal reflection, polarization, which we are going to learn in the next part. All these things could not be explained by the corpuscle theory, and so therefore then there was another theory which had been brought about by Planck, and when he was doing a black body radiations, and therefore that is a time when he came out with the theory that no, that light is nothing but an electromagnetic wave, right? And like he was doing research on heat, he said that heat is also an electromagnetic wave, but which is not visible, and the Vibgyor, they are electromagnetic waves which are visible, and what we call as light is the visible electromagnetic wave. So we have visible electromagnetic wave and invisible electromagnetic waves. The lower than red color, red is known as infrared region, which are all heat waves, and above violet, they are cooler waves, but they are very high frequency waves like X-rays and gamma rays, where the penetration power is much more higher. So because of these theories, first it was felt or given by the scientists that all these rays or these light waves, they can only travel in the atmosphere. They require a particle through which the particles vibrate, and that is why the waves start getting transmitted, or they travel at a particular speed. They felt because light was here in the atmosphere, and atmosphere contains so many particles, so the theory started being believed. Yes, that light is a transverse wave, and because of the particles, the energy is being transmitted, like how sound waves or any other transverse wave would be transmitted. Then there was a school of thoughts which came, if that is the case, then how come sunlight is reaching our earth? Because in the space there is no atmosphere. To then again the scientists started thinking, and then they came out with the theory that the whole space consists of some gas called as ether, and that is what helps the light to propagate in the space. Through over a research of years of research, they realized that there is nothing like ether in the space. So it was just given an explanation to support the theory that a light wave passes due to vibration of particles. And after that, the electromagnetic nature was developed. It was very much sure, or it was very much confirmed, that light is nothing but a wave. But what kind of a wave, those people could not understand. So later on it came out that light is from the Planck's experiment, that light is nothing but an electromagnetic wave. After this, there was again one more research through which it came a conclusion. It was concluded that light is also behaving like a particle. This is one of the chapters that we are going to do about photoelectric, in which it was seen that one photon would eject one electron from the metal. So that 1:1 is the property of a particle, not of a wave. So again then there was a confusion that it has a property of particle also. Then in the 19th century, ultimately it was decided by the Forum of Physics and the scientists throughout the whole world that light has got a dual nature. It has got a particle nature also as well as a wave nature also. So now we are working with this theory. Again, everything is an hypothesis and we are assuming that light is a wave and a particle, and most of the experiments and about 12 properties of light are there which satisfies both these properties of wave as well as particle. Now Huygens had come out with an proposal of how to represent the light and how it can be imagined to be propagating. What he said was that a light which starts from a particular source, right? So there are different types of light. One is a light sources are of two types. One which is the originator of light, like a torch. When you on the torch, what does it do? It radiates light from the bulb. So it's a source of light. It is generating light. What is sun doing? It is radiating light. It is generating these electromagnetic waves. What is moon doing? Moon is not generating its own light. It is only reflecting the light that is incident by the sun rays. Similarly, we humans, we do not radiate light, we do not generate light, but we reflect light which that falls on us. Light could be the sunlight or the tube lights that fall on us, we reflect them. So, and so many objects, as you can see. So we have got two types of light. One which is a primary source which generates light, and second is a secondary source which reflects light. So based on these two assumptions, Huygens came out with the concept that if there is a source of light, it will travel in all the directions. It will travel in all the directions. Clear? Now he says when it is going to travel in all the direction, then after some time t, because the velocity of light is constant for all the rays, these are the various rays which are traveling in all directions, means basically in a spherical direction it is traveling. Now at a given time t, all these rays are going to reach a fixed position, right? They are all going to reach a fixed distance. No, it will create it. They will travel a distance d in time t, and this distance is given as what? When we know that velocity is equal to distance upon time, so the distance traveled will be equal to v into time t. This is the distance traveled from the source O, right? And then what will happen? You will be able to see a sphere, right? Because all these points, suppose if I give this as A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, they travel the same distance v into t in time t. Now he further says that when they reach at this particular point, there will be so many dots, no? There will be infinite points. His theory says that those points now act like secondary source of light. This was the primary source, or this primary source also would be a secondary of some light that is reflected at this particular point. So that point starts radiating light in all the direction, and suppose it reaches this particular point, all these points they now become the secondary source of transmission. They are different points which become now a secondary source of transmission. So this acts like a source, and so they start radiating light in all different directions. This was the theory that he proposed, right? This is just to represent light. Now again in time t1, all this will travel at different directions. That is a spherical, and they will reach a point, maybe A dash, B dash, C dash, D dash, E dash, F dash. And if you draw a locus of all that points, again you will find it is a spherical surface, right? It will also form a spherical surface. So as you can see, this blue one has now come to this red one. Now he calls this as a wave front. As a wave front. He calls this as a wave front. That is, the wave front starts propagating in the forward direction, and all these are all what is called as wavelets. So there are small wavelets which starts getting transmitted from this particular points. Though I have shown it in a very bigger manner, they will be very small wavelets, and they again construct another sphere, and that is how the light starts traveling. Now again from these points also, again from these points again there will be wavelets which will act like secondary source of transmission, and again another wavefront will be generated after some time t. And these wavefronts, this point, they start radiating in all the direction. But there was one clause which he had put in that this travel will always be in the forward direction and not in the backward direction. So the backward direction part, that means the sphere, the wavefront, there will not be any wavefront in the backward direction. Can you see? This is the backward direction, this is my front direction. It never travels backward, it will always go in the forward direction. So the locus of all the points which are joined of those wavelets in the forward direction will create that wavefront. So the backward sphere points, if I join those points at the back of the sphere, wavefront is that is not called as a wavefront. Only those in the front side, right, in the progressive side, when I join a line connecting to all that tangents of that sphere, that is called as a wavefront. As you can see here, because the point source is a small point source, the wavefronts will be of what form? They will be in the form of a sphere, like a small sphere which is growing in size, correct? But here understand one thing, that from here there will again be an hemisphere. There will be an hemisphere which will be transmitting light in all the direction, from this source, again from this source, again from this source, and this is how the light will start radiating from this secondary source of light. This was my primary source, so it came to this particular point, that has become a secondary source. Then it will create n number of points, and all those points will now start radiating a spherical what you call wavelets, a spherical in a spherical shape. Light will be transmitted, and when I join the lines of the tangents of all that small spheres, what I will get is a wavefront. So is this clear? So this was the theory which was formulated by Huygens. Okay, so let us see the theory what he had proposed and what he had basically mentioned, right? Okay. Let us see here the theory that was mentioned by Huygens. He says that each point on a wavefront acts like a secondary source of light, emitting secondary light waves called wavelets in all directions, which travel with the speed of light in the medium. The new wavefront can be obtained by taking the envelope of the secondary wavelets traveling in the forward direction, and is thus the envelope of the secondary wavelets in the forward direction. The wavelet traveling in the backward direction is ineffective. Okay, so this was that theory that was given by Huygens. So from this you must have got an idea of what his theory was for a propagation of light wave. Now it is a very surprising fact that with the help of this theory, actually these two equations could be proved. Okay, what was the two equations? The two equations, that was one for reflection of light and second that was for refraction of light. Up till now, have you ever received a derivation which gives the Snell's law that refractive index is equal to sin I upon sin R? No. There was only a relation that the speed of light changes when it enters a media, right? And there was a relation about the velocity with respect to the refractive index. That was an established equation which had come by proper experiments. But the relation mu is equal to sin I upon sin R, the Snell's law, that was proved by this Huygens theory, which we are going to see very shortly. Secondly, for an reflection, the angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. We have been using this in all our problems. This we have been assuming because I had given you this theory that sin I is equal to sin R, but there was never a proof that was given to you. So that is the proof also that we are going to see making use of the Huygens theory. Right? Before we go that, let us see what are the different types of wavefronts that we can have. The first wavefront we had seen was a spherical wavefront, as if this was the source of light. This would create one sphere. This sphere will have n number of wavelets. It will have n number of wavelets, and all these wavelets, which acts like a secondary source of light, will create another sphere if I join. So this will again create wavelets. So ultimately we have a wavefront which is traveling in the forward direction. So this is called as nothing but a wavefront, right? So a wavefront, as you can see, is perpendicular to the direction of traveling of light. This is the wavefront, no? This is wavefront. How it is? It is perpendicular to the propagation of light. This is a very important aspect that you should understand. If there is a linear source of light, then the light is going to travel in a linear way, and in this case the perpendicular to this point as you can see, the perpendicular, this plane here is going to be called as this is perpendicular to the propagation of light, and this is called as a plane wavefront. This is called as a spherical wavefront. This is known as a spherical wavefront, and this is known as a plane wavefront, right? So these are the two types of wavefronts that you will always see. One is spherical, second is plane, and there is one more third which is known as a cylindrical wavefront. So what is the cylindrical wavefront? You can see this as a form of a cylinder. So this cylinder itself is a wavefront because the source of light, the light is traveling, all this point source is giving in this particular plane. So as you can see over here, when there is a line source, here this was a plane source, the source was in the form of a plane. All these points were being transmitted from one basic plane, right? And so which is going to create a plane wavefront. All the sources of light, as you can see, this back side is one plane A, B, C, D, and it has got n number of sources which is transmitting primary light. This source, then they come on the second plane, that is A dash, B dash, C dash and D dash, and here they will start transmitting. They will act like secondary source of lights, and they will again start radiating in the forward direction, which will create one more plane wave this way. So this plane is getting propagated in the form of a plane, that is why it is called as a plane wavefront. Here, if the source of light is not on a plane but on a small stick, right? So these are the source of light. So they will start radiating in a cylindrical format. So this cylinder is a wavefront. After some time, this cylinder from this particular axis, it will propagate to a bigger cylinder this way, right? But in the same plane. So this way the cylinder keeps on increasing in size from the central axis, and so this is known as a cylindrical wavefront. Cylindrical wavefront. So these are the three types of wavefronts which are normally commonly seen, observed and taught. So you should be knowing these terminologies, that the wavefront is something which is perpendicular to the transmission of rays that passes through a point source, a plane source and a line source. The source here is a point source. Here it is a plane which is responsible for emitting energy, and this is a line which is emitting, where the radiation will take in a cylindrical format. Yeah. Now here we are going to try to see the proof about angle of reflection, that is angle of incidence is equal to angle of reflection. So here I have drawn one plane mirror, and there is one ray that is incident on it. So let me give this ray as A and this point as B. So this is my ray AB, which is incident on this particular mirror. Now let me have two rays which are coming parallel, so that this is one ray AB. So similarly, let me have one more ray which is parallel to that. Let me call this as AB, this is C and this is D. So this ray will also follow the same principle of reflection, right? So like this is the reflected ray B dash. Similarly, we will be able to have C1 reflected ray, that is D dash. Is this clear? So CD is a ray which is falling on this, D dash is a ray which is being reflected from this point. Now here what we are going to consider, we are going to follow this Huygens theory. In the Huygens theory, what he says that if a ray comes at a particular point after it travels a particular distance, the wavefront keeps on traveling, right, in a direction which is perpendicular to the ray. We had seen the wave fronts were perpendicular to the direction of transmission. So now if I take this ray AB and if I have to draw a wavefront, so the wavefront will be perpendicular to AB. So if I draw a perpendicular to AB, it will be, this would be the perpendicular line to AB. So B and N, as you can see, this is perpendicular and this also will be perpendicular to this. So BN, as you can see, BN is nothing but a wavefront, is a wavefront for the ray. Now let us take these two parallel ray AAB, for ray AB and CD. So CD is also one ray, AB is also one ray, and B and N, BN, as you can see, this is perpendicular to both the rays, and so this can be called as your what? As your wavefront. So Bn is your wavefront. Is this clear? Right. Okay. So now Bn is a wavefront. Now in this transmission of light, as you can see, from point B the ray is reflected. The ray is reflected. Now it will reach some particular distance because of the velocity v. At the same point, at the same time, look at this condition that B is over here and N is over here. B is over here and N is over here. Now these 2 points, right, they will start acting like the secondary source of light. Now this is going to travel, this will act like a source, this point will also act like a source, and this point will also act like a source, and it will create a, let us say, a wavelet in this direction, and this will also create a wavelet maybe in, say, suppose in this direction, right? Because they act like a source, they are creating, they are generating a wavelet in this direction, and this is also generating a wavelet in this direction. So it travels a distance B and M, whereas this travels from N to D. The time taken will be the same because they are, both the rays are in air, and in time t, N will travel from here to here. In the same time t, B will travel from here to here, right? So this will be the positions of these two secondary wavelets. So let us say B and N, they are secondary wavelets, right? And the sphere that you see are the wavefronts. This is the wavefront that is being generated by the secondary wavelets B and N. Now if I draw a tangent here, if I join both these points, okay, then what am I getting? I am getting two triangles. One triangle is BMD and another triangle is BND. Can you see these two triangles? B, M and D, and another triangle is B, N and D, of which you will see from this triangle that angle M equal to 90 degrees. This angle M is 90 degrees. Sorry, not angle M. Yeah, we have drawn a tangent here, no, to this particular ray. So this is 90 degrees, and similarly in angle B and D, angle N is equal to 90 degrees. This is already 90 because BN is a wavefront which is perpendicular to the ray CD. So angle M and angle N, both of them are 90 degrees. Second, you can see the second property of these two triangles is that they have got a common side BD. So you have BD equal to BD. In both the triangles, BD is same. So you have BD equal to BD. So both the sides are same. Now we had also seen that this side, the distance BM is the distance traveled by the secondary source of light from B to M. In the same time, the distance was traveled by N to D in the same time t, which gives me what? That BM distance is equal to ND, because distance is velocity into time t, and velocity of both the waves are same. Why they are same? Because they are traveling in air. So velocity in air for both the rays are same, because after reflection the rays are traveling in air. So therefore we have another property, that is your BM is equal to ND. So what do we see from here? The theory of congruent triangles, which means similar triangles. This is a SAS, that is side angle side. Because of two sides and angle they are same, so we can say triangle BMD. We have triangle BMD which is congruent to triangle B and D. So from here, what do we conclude? Because that triangle are this, that angle NBD, that is NBD, that this angle is equal to angle MDB, is equal to triangle MDB. This is the conclusion of this two theories. Okay. Okay. Now let us consider, now if this is a normal, so this x and x dash, they are the normal to this plane. Now we always consider this angle as my angle of incidence and this angle as my angle of reflection. Similarly, this would be the angle of incidence for ray CD and this would be my angle of reflection for ray D dash. Correct? Now from the geometry, if this is angle I, then this angle will also be equal to I. That is angle NBD is equal to I. Now in this triangle, if this is angle R, then this angle will also be equal to R. That is angle MDB. MDB is equal to angle R. And from this proof, from equation 1, we can conclude that I is equal to R. That is angle of incidence is equal to the angle of reflection. So hence it is with the help of this Huygens theory that we are able to prove the laws of reflection, that is sin I equal to sin R. Second, now you will keep wondering, sir, why this I is equal to I? What does, by which geometry you can prove that? If you drew some construction of lines and if you use the concept of corresponding angles, alternate angles, you will come to know that this angle of this triangle will always be equal to I. I'll just show to you that A, B and N is 90 degrees. And similarly, X, B and D is also 90 degrees because X and X dash is a normal to the plane BD. So suppose if I keep this set square over here, this corresponds to A, B and what we call N. So this is A, B and N. So if I turn this way, I am turning it through an angle I. Can you see? I am turning it through an angle I. So this angle I or this angle I, can you see in both the cases? Now here this is an angle I. If I turn it through an angle I will able to see this angle I, which means this angle is equal to this angle. Same thing will be the case of this. If I keep it in this way, I can see this as angle R. If I turn through an angle R, I will see another angle R over here. So this R is equal to this R. Here I have shown you by a basic experiment, but if you draw certain lines, some construction lines, you yourself will come to know by making use of the theorems of alternate angle theorem, corresponding angle theorem, that angle, this angle I and this angle I is the same, and this angle R and this angle R is the same, right? Now this proof gives a very important relation, that I is equal to R. Along with this, it also gives me another relation. Just look at the other relation. Another relation is that AB and CD are two rays which are coming, say, from an object. So suppose this is an object. So this is an object A and C. So the rays are parallel rays are coming from an object which is incident on the mirror, and they are traveling, and after getting reflected, they are traveling in this direction. Correct? So they are creating an image. A is creating an image over here. So this will be the tail part of this, and this will be the head part of that image. Now from this triangle, if I is equal to R, we can also say that side MD, now this was the one more side of this triangle, MD will be equal to BM, will be equal to BN, because they are congruent triangles. So side MD will be equal to side BN. Okay, so what does this mean? That the width of the incoming ray or the incident ray is equal to the width of the reflected ray. So the size of the image will be equal to the size of the object, which exactly takes place when we have a mirror. In the mirror we had seen the size of the image is equal to the size of the object. It can be, you can see it is getting proved by this concept. You can see this width from this conclusion that MD is equal to BN. So the size of image and object are same. Second, one more relation that you can see from this is that there is a lateral inversion of the object and image. Lateral inversion means if whenever we see our hand in this particular way, right, the image is seen in this way. This is called as a lateral inversion. This is the kind of mirror that we will see. Right left gets changed. It doesn't become upside down. So whenever it gets inverted into right and left, it is called as a lateral inversion in mirrors. So as you can see, A, which is formed over here, this is the tail of that will be seen over here, and this image will be a lateral inversion of the object AC. Okay, so this is the theory for your mirror using the Huygens theory. Okay, now here we are going to prove our second law, that is your Snell's law, in which we have sin I equal to sin R, making use of this Huygens theory. Let me explain this construction to you. Now this is a media that separates a refractive index mu1 and mu2. Mu1 is a refractive index of media 1 and mu2 is a refractive index of media 2. We have a ray OA striking at point O and CP striking at point P. The rays get refracted at O as OB and this as PD. Now I have drawn OE, which is an wavefront. We have OE, which is an wavefront for rays AO and CE. OE is a wavefront for rays OA and CE. Similarly, FP is a wavefront for rays FB and PD. So FP is what? It's a wavefront for rays PD and OB, which are refracted rays. Now let us consider this wavefront OE. After time t, O will act like a secondary source and start radiating this wavefront. You can see this red dotted line, this will be a wavefront, and after time t, it will reach point F. E at the same time is also acting like a Huygens wavelet and it will start radiating a wavefront which will reach point P. So in time t, E will reach point P, and in the same time t, O will reach point F, such that distance EP will be equal to V1t and distance OF will be equal to V2t. EP will be equal to V1t and OF will be equal to V2t in time t. Now if you look at triangle O, E and P, from this description, as you can see, angle I is the angle of incidence of ray OA. What is angle I? Angle I is the angle of incidence AO on this particular media, on the surface of suppression. If this is angle I and this is a right angle triangle, and let me consider this as one angle, that is the dot. These are the three angles. What is this angle? This angle is I, 90 degrees and dot. Now you will see this ray is parallel to this ray. So this dot will be equal to this dot. By which law? Alternate angle theorem. This dot will be equal to this dot as per the alternate angle theorem. Now this line is parallel to this line, and this is a line joining the two parallel lines. So from this corresponding angle theorem, this dot will be equal to this dot. So in this triangle, if one is 90 degrees and one is dot, the third will be I, because in this triangle one was dot, one was 90 degrees, the third was I. So therefore this angle will be equal to angle of incidence. Similarly, in the triangle OF and P, this will be your angle R, which is nothing but the angle of refraction R over here, from the same geometrical conclusion. Like we proved that this I is equal to this I, similarly this R is also equal to this R, can be proved by the similar method that we read over here. Now in your triangle OE and P and triangle OP and F, OP is equal to OP, both of them have got a common side. Now if I say that sin I in this particular triangle will be equal to EP upon OP, and sin R in this triangle OF and P will be equal to OF upon OP. Dividing both this equation, sin I upon sin R will be equal to EP upon OP upon OF upon OP. OP will get cancelled, so you will have EP upon OF, which is nothing but EP is what? V1T upon V2T. T and T will get cancelled, that is V1 upon V2. So this is a very important relation that we have derived, that sin I upon sin R is equal to V1 upon V2. And we had seen from the last equation that V1 upon V2, that is velocity of light in this media upon velocity of light in another media, is also given as mu2 upon mu1, right? This was experimentally deducted that V1 upon V2 was equal to mu2 upon mu1, and mu2 upon mu1 it can also be written as, that is C upon V2 upon C upon V1, and therefore it is mu2 upon mu1. C is velocity of light in air, and the ratio of velocity of light in air to V2 is mu2. Velocity of light in air upon V1 is mu1, right? So the Snell's law, which says that sin I upon sin R equal to mu2 upon mu1, is proved with the help of this Huygens theory. Is this clear? Now here at this particular point, this is a part of a proof that we had seen over here. Please pay attention. This part comes as a problem in your CET or even in a JEE mains. It says that, as you can see, the width of the incoming ray is OE, is the width of the incoming ray. After bending, the width FP has got reduced. It has got reduced. Okay. So, or rather, there is a change of width of the incoming ray and the refracted ray. There is a change of width. In the reflection, in the last case we had seen the width of the incident ray and the width of the reflected ray was same, but here the widths are not going to be the same. So using this relation, or rather using this diagram, there are questions which are asked that if the width of the incoming ray is maybe say 20 centimeter, what will be the width of the refracted ray? So to solve those problems, you have to redraw this diagram in these two triangles. You have to redraw, in which they have given the width OE and they have given the width FP. Now with FP and OE, what will you get? You can get cos I and sin and cos R, because it would be in this adjacent side and this would be the adjacent side. Because we have taken the opposite side, I am able to get sin I upon sin R. So when they give you the width of one incident ray, they will ask you the width of the refracted ray. So to find that, you will have to use the concept of cos I upon cos R. So what will be cos I? Cos I will be OE upon OP and cos R will be FP upon OP. OP will get cancelled, like this was, it was cancelled over here, and ultimately you will have cos I upon cos R equal to OE upon FP, and you are being asked to find FP. But how do you find cos I upon cos R? You do not know. They have given you mu2 and mu1. So with the help of mu2 and mu1, you can find sin I upon sin R, and sin I can be written as cos 90 plus I, and sin R can be written as cos 90 plus R. And this is the way you will be solving those type of problems. Correct? So please understand, this diagram is not important just for the proof part of that, but it's also important for solving certain problems which will be asked normally in CET, NEET or mains, in which the width of the incident and the width of the refracted ray is considered or it is asked, for which these two diagrams are very important, these two triangles, right? So please make a note of that. Well, hello students. So now today we are going to learn one important topic about again ray optics. As we have seen, it has got various different properties. Okay. So as I have said from our last session, that today now we are going to learn about polarization of light. You know, polarization of light, it's again a different concept like total internal reflection. Now you may be wondering why sir has come wearing this goggle when there is no sunlight, there is only normal lighting over here. Well, the reason for me to wear this goggle is to show you an experiment about polarization, and this can be shown properly by a Polaroid goggle. So this goggle which I am using is known as a Polaroid goggle. It has got special properties of a polarization, and as you can see, I can remove my goggle this particular way. Please don't try with your spectacles. This is a special being procured for that. Now here it has got this two goggles, as you can see, filters. I would now use the word filter. So I will just remove these filters from this particular part. This is one, and this is my second. So can you see, we have removed my both this filters from my goggle. Now let us let us see one small experiment from this. Okay. Now I will show you this topic that has been written in the board. I have not rubbed it, so that I will be able to show you through the help of this filter. Now I am keeping this filter in front of the camera. Are you able to read the contents of what is written on the board? It says 0E is equal to wavefront. You can see everything very clearly, right? Now, as if you can see, I am rotating this filter. Now by rotating the filter, now I have rotated by 90 degrees. Now I have still rotated, I have rotated further by 180 degrees. Okay. Now in this rotation of 90 and coming back to 0 degree, did you see any change in the intensity? No. did you see, or where the images or whatever is written on the board was seen a bit blurred? No, right? How much ever I rotate this film, you will see the contents of the board with the same clarity. Is that clear? Now I have this second filter. Now I will keep this filter aside. Now this filter again, I am rotating it by various degrees. As I am rotating, do you see the contents? Right? Is the intensity of the contents of the board changing? No. Right? So as how much ever I rotate to whatever degrees, I can still feel, I can see that it is being, I can see the board very clearly. Okay. So it's a filter which definitely, here the intensity is quite bright. By putting this filter, the intensity has reduced. But whatever is the intensity of this filter, this intensity remains same how much ever I turn this filter, to whatever degrees I turn this filter. Now what I am going to do is use both the filters one after another, right? So this filter I am using, right? So this is one filter, and the second filter I have brought it in front of it. Now keeping this first filter, I am keeping this, see I have got two filters in my two hands. So one filter I am keeping it straight, second filter I am keeping it in front of the first filter. Now I will start rotating my second filter. Now just look at the intensity, it is getting darker and darker, and when I have rotated through 90 degrees, can you see one filter I have rotated through 90 degrees, it has become dark, I cannot see anything from the board. Again I bring it back to 0 degrees, I am able to see the contents of this board. So if I rotate it through 90 degrees, suddenly it becomes dark and I am not able to see anything, it becomes like a 100% opaque material. Individually, if I see, there is no problem. From both these filters I can see the contents without any problem. Now this is rotated and this is in the same plane. But if I rotate this and I keep one up above other, you can see that it gives total darkness and I am not able to see anything. Fine. So this was the experiment which I had to show you so that I can explain to you what polarization is. Fine. Now why did this thing happen? Right? When I had one filter in this direction, it was showing me all the contents properly. Second filter also no problem. I rotated all the two filters in 180 degrees, still no problem. The moment I overlap these two filters, and that too when they were in the same plane, no problem. But the moment they were 190 degrees with each other, suddenly the central part where the overlapping took place became opaque and you could not see anything through that. So let us understand why this thing has happened. Right? Basically, let us understand that a ray of light consists of an electric wave and a magnetic wave. Okay. Here the magnetic wave is not shown. I have explained to you that the magnetic wave is 90 degrees to your electric wave. But here we are just considering only the electric waveform. Now we are considering the electric waveform only in one plane. But I had explained to you that electric light does not consist of only one plane of vibration. Suppose this plane, if I consider this plane to be the plane of this board and the plane of my hand, right? Suppose this waveform is there on my hand. Let me show you in this way. Suppose if this is a waveform right? And this is the plane in which the vibration or the changes is taking place. So a ray of light in this particular way, it has got multiple planes of vibration. It is not just one plane. This is plane 1, plane 2, plane 3, plane 4, plane 5, plane 6, n number of planes of vibrations are there in a ray of light, correct? Not just one plane. Now if you look at from this direction, those planes can be seen in this particular way. Are you getting me? This is the planes of vibration. This is one plane. This is another plane. This is another plane. This is another plane of vibration. So such a electric wave is vibrating in this plane, this plane, this plane and this plane. Now it is because of these multiple planes of vibrations, it is because of these multiple planes of vibration, a ray has a certain intensity, right? Suppose in a ray, if there are about 1000 planes of vibration, the intensity of the ray which causes a sensation in our eye is because of those 1000 planes which are vibrating at different planes. Now if I reduce it to say 50%, or if I reduce the number of planes, then what is going to happen? The intensity is going to get reduced. That is exactly happens when we use a kind of a filter or goggles, right? So these goggles and these filters, what do? They reduce the intensity of the ray of light that is coming into our eyes, falling on our eyes. So therefore, if I reduce these planes and I only keep one plane, if I keep only one plane, right, then what is going to happen? My intensity is going to get reduced, correct? So at one point you had about 1000 planes of vibration, and now here only one of that vibration I am selecting, the others I am suppressing. Then what will happen? The intensity will get reduced down. And that exactly happens by a substance which has got a plane of vibration, which is called as a polarized substance. A polarized material is a material which has got a sleeve like a concept, you know, you can try to imagine that they have got a vertical slits this way. They have got vertical slits. So a light which is incident on it from this, suppose from the back side, there is a light which is incident and it has got many planes of vibrations, right? It has got many planes of vibrations through which the light rays being composed. If this vertical polarized, it has got it does not have any physical sections, but the property is in such that it will allow from here only one plane of light to pass through this, right? So only one plane of this ray, as I had shown you over here, a ray consists of n number of planes. It consists of n number of planes. I have just shown 1, 2, 3 and 4. Just 4 planes I am showing over here. So those 4 planes of vibrations are coming. Because of the nature of this slit is in the vertical, only one plane is being passed because it can vibrate only in the direction of the slits which are open in that direction. Now this plane, when it passes through another filter of the same type, same polarized filter, right, it also has got slits in the vertical directions. So what will happen? In the same plane, if I am keeping in the same angle, so this will also pass from this filter and the ray will pass from both the filters. Now that is what exactly happened when both the filters, when both these filters I had kept in the same plane, you know, in the same plane I had kept. So the light was passing when both these things are there, still the light will pass through them, right? Because it is only passing vibration in one plane. This is also passing the vibration of light in one plane. This is one filter and this is second filter. So out of n number of rays, rays with different orientation are falling on this. Only the rays which are vertical, this is a vertical filter this way, this is also a vertical filter this way. So it is passing only one ray of light. When I am rotating this, what happens? as I have said, there are n number of planes which are waiting on one side of this. So when I rotate, it selects one of the planes and allows that plane to pass through that. There is one ray of light at every angle. At every angle there is one plane. So when I rotate this is, suppose the direction is in this, suppose the direction is in this vertical direction. If I rotate this, in this direction also there is one plane waiting at the back of it. So that ray will be allowed to pass through that. When I further rotate it, there will be now the rotation, the plane of vibration is in this direction, no? So in this direction there will be a plane which will be vibrating in that direction. So that is allowed to go out. So when I rotate this through 360 degrees, I do not find any change of intensity. But in actuality, it allows only one plane to pass through this filter. And because there are so many planes, we can say at 360 degrees, there are 360 planes of vibration. What will happen when I rotate this? So in my rotation, the intensity, only one ray of light is going to pass. So my intensity is going to remain constant. Are you getting this concept? So because of this, what happens? This acts as a filter for my goggle. Normally, I do not know what is happening as a common man. But because it stops all the other rays and only one ray is falling to my eyes, so I start feeling a bit cooler. I start feeling pleasant. The harshness of the sun is not felt by my eyes. Or in the daylight when I am going out, so this polarized things do not get affected. Okay. Basically, these polarized films were developed for pilots when they were flying at a very particular altitude. The rays, sun rays, are very harsh, you know. So in order for them to protect the intensity, they used to use these filters, and along with, by changing the direction angle, they could filter the intensity of the ray that was falling on their eyes. That used to give them that pleasantness. Okay. Now, basically what happened, look here. Now this plane, as I rotated this plane, right, in such a way that this plane of vibration now was in this particular direction. Now what would happen? This filter has allowed it has selected only that plane of vibration which was vertical. Now here when it falls on this vertical part is blocked. This is being selected only for horizontal vibration, but there is no ray of light which is vibrating in the horizontal direction. With the result, what happens? There will be no ray of light coming out of this filter. There will be no ray of light coming out of this filter. That is what exactly happened when I changed the direction of the other filter by 90 degrees. There was a total blockage and I could not see anything beyond these two filters. It was behaving like an opaque substance. Fine. So this plane of vibration, this is called as a polarized light. So what is the meaning of polarized light? When the light when a plane of light or a ray of light, it falls on a polarized substance, when it allows only one plane of vibration, it is called as a fully plane polarized light. Plane polarized light means in which the vibration or the sine wave or the oscillation takes place in only one plane, that is called as a plane polarized light. Okay. There is also something called as a partial polarization. In partial polarization, what happens? If there are 1000 rays of planes which are incident, a particular filter will only pass maybe 20 planes of vibrations, maybe 100 planes of vibration. It is not completely polarization. So it is called as a partial polarization. Got it? So this concept is known as a concept of polarization. Now here there are certain conventions which have to be followed by using this. When I am showing a ray of light this way, okay, so here to show this ray of light, I am showing there is a vibration, it is vibrating in one plane. This is a symbolic representation of fully plane polarized ray of light, where the vibration is only in one direction. But if it is an unpolarized light, that means which contains all the planes of vibration, so it will show one plane of vibration perpendicular to this plane, which will be shown as a dot over here. So when I show a dot over here, this means it is unpolarized light, and when I show only normal arrows without a dot, this line is represented and is called, this is plane polarized. This is plane . This is plane polarized, and this is unpolarized. Okay. So toluene is one of the crystal which is used for polarization of light. There are many chemicals also which they say, you must have heard in chemistry, that does polarization of light. Now the polarization of light is done in the positive direction when the liquids, they change their orientation. I mean, sir will be able to tell you more in detail about this polarization on chemical solutions, right? So that is also one of the methods of checking certain solutions which are sensitive to polarization. Okay. So polarization, as now you have understood, is the property of a material which allows only certain vibrations of light to pass through that, and obstructing and not blocking the other planes of vibration. And if a material allows only one plane of vibration to pass through that, that plane of vibration is called as a plane polarized light. Fine, is that clear? Okay. So with this particular property, we are going to have we are going to study some law which is known as the Brewster's law. Okay. So if you have understood this, please make a note of this so that we will go to the next topic. So again we are coming back to this diagram of normal refraction, in which this is your angle of incidence I and this will be the angle of refraction R. Now in a glass, this is a transparent media having a refractive index mu2, or say let us say mu, and say this is 1 for air. When a ray of light is incident from air on a glass, I is the angle of incidence, R is the angle of refraction. Now when this ray of light gets incident on this, all glasses, all transparent material, as you must have seen in your house also, from a normal glass you can see some reflection, right? Every glass, how much ever transparent it is always going to reflect some part of light. Now this reflection is not total internal reflection, it's a partial reflection. I would say about 10% of that light is reflected and 90% gets refracted. But that 10% of light, you can see an image. That image is not a very bright image, it's a very dark image, right? Because because only 10% of light is reflected, so that image is not so bright. Okay. Now because of this property of glass, there is one more important thing that you have to understand, that in this incident glass, let us assume that this is your reflected ray of light, which is just 10% of the refracted ray. So here it will have a refraction R. Okay. Now this ray of light has got some unique property, the one which is getting reflected. This is the ray which is getting reflected. What is the unique property? The unique property is that the ray which is falling, it is an unpolarized light. So let us show it in our conventional method that we have just studied the sign conventions. An unpolarized light will be shown as arrows and a big dot in the center. That means it is vibrating in all the planes, all the possible planes of vibration. When it strikes inside this also becomes a partially polarized light. That means certain planes are missing from this. In the refracted ray, certain planes are missing. It is not polarized. Certain planes of vibrations are missing, and those planes have got reflected. Because intensity is nothing but the total number of rays. Suppose if 1000 rays planes are incident on it, maybe 800 rays will pass through that and 200 rays will get reflected. Right? That is why the intensity of the reflected ray on the transparent media is always less as compared to the refracted ray. Now here this reflected ray is always it is partially plane polarized. It is not fully plane polarized, but it is partially plane polarized. Now we are going to study the Brewster's law. Now in this Brewster's law, he had found out, or he had discovered, that there is one angle of incidence which is called as the polarizing angle IP. Pay attention properly. There is one such angle. Now this ray can take up angles from 0 to 90 degrees. The incident ray can go from 0 to 90 degrees. So between 0 to 90 degrees, there is one angle which we call it as IP, that is called as the polarizing angle, which is denoted as IP. Remember, IC is used for critical angle for total internal reflection. You should not confuse that IC with IP. Here IP is the polarizing angle, right? And IC was used to denote your critical angle for total internal reflection. Now the polarizing angle which is equal to IP, right? There is one such angle between 0 to 90 degrees. In that, what happens? The reflected ray is fully plane polarized. The reflected ray is fully plane polarized. That means there is only one plane of vibration that takes place in the reflected ray, right? So it exactly behaves as though a ray would be passing from such a kind of an polarized film, where only one plane of vibration is passing through this. So in this particular, reflected ray is fully plane polarized. So will you remember this very important concept, that in all given materials of glass, there is always one angle of incidence which is called as IP, wherein the reflected ray is fully plane polarized. Are you getting this concept? Okay. Now, when it is fully plane polarized, there is one more important thing that takes place. What is the second important thing that takes place? The angle of the reflected ray and the refracted ray is 90 degrees. The angle of the reflected ray and the refracted ray, the angle between this is 90 degrees. The angle between the refracted ray and reflected ray is 90 degrees. This is your two important aspects, one that is fully plane polarized, and the refracted ray and the reflected ray forms an angle of 90 degrees with each other. So these two are the basic known discoveries of Brewster, and which is commonly known as the Brewster's law. Correct? Now let us see one small derivation from this. We know that sin I upon sin R is equal to mu. Mu means refractive index of the glass, water, whatever it is, and this part is going to be your air. Okay. Now from here, what kind of a relation are we going to generate from this? We know that I is equal to R. So I is equal to R. That means for this plane polarization, IP is equal to IP. So this R we can call that is equal to IP. Okay. Now sin I will replace this sin by sin IP. Okay. Now in this particular part, as this is your R and this is your angle of refraction, and this is your angle of reflection, which now I will mention it as I only, because this is going to be I, and this is my angle of refraction R. So it should not get confused. So here this R was the angle of reflection, not the refraction angle. Okay. So I is equal to, I would say I is equal to I, which is equal to IP. Right. Now if you look at this axis, this total is 180 degrees. So this 180 degrees comprises of what? I plus 90 plus R equal to 180 degrees. This is the total 180 degrees that I am talking about, right? So this comprises of I plus this, from here it is 90 degrees. This is the Brewster's situation, and this angle is the angle of refraction. So I will have I plus R equal to 90 and R equal to 90 minus I. So this R, if I replace over here, what am I going to get? Sin 90 minus I equal to mu. I am getting this particular relation. So this relation can further, 90 minus I is how much? Is cos I. So it is going to be sin IP upon cos IP equal to mu, that is equal to tan IP. This is the equation, dear students, which is a derivation of Brewster's law. So whenever the polarizing angle is given to you, so you should know this relation, that tan IP is equal to mu. Now this, any particular glass will always have a refractive index mu, which will always have a polarizing angle IP, and the tan of that IP will be equal to the refractive index of this. And what relation we had for the critical index, critical angle for total internal reflection, that we had mu is equal to, IC was equal to sine inverse of 1 upon mu. IC was equal to sine inverse of 1 upon mu, and here IP is equal to tan inverse of mu, or mu equal to tan IP. So this was the famous Brewster's law. We will be having problems based on this Brewster's law also, and the total internal reflection also, right? So please make a note of this derivation, and here it ends our topic on polarization of light.